We've traveled all over Italy in the last few years, and we've probably made every mistake in the book.
We don't want you to make them, so in this video, we'll share the biggest mistakes tourists make in Italy and how to avoid them. The number one mistake that visitors to Italy make is building an unrealistic itinerary. They try to see too many places in too short of a vacation. Now, I get it. This is your dream trip to Italy and you want to see it all. You want to see Rome, Florence, Venice, Pisa, the Amalfi Coast, Cinque Terre. But the reality is that you can't see it all. And if you try to, you'll end up rushing from place to place with barely enough time to take a selfie in each location. One thing people often fail to take into account is the amount of time they eat up traveling from one city to another and checking in and out of their locations. This can eat up a half a day or more each time you change locations. A good rule of thumb is to try to spend 3 nights in each location. That way, even if you lose a half a day on the front end and on the back end, you'll still have enough time to immerse yourself in the local culture and truly savor it. On the flip side, another mistake is thinking that Rome, Florence, and Venice equals Italy, and not venturing beyond these 3 cities to the smaller towns and villages around the countryside. Of course, these 3 cities are wonderful, and you could spend literally weeks in any one of them and still not see everything. But they are geared for tourists, and tourists far outnumber the locals, especially in Venice and Florence. If you want to immerse yourself in the real Italy, you should try to get off the beaten path and visit some of the less touristy areas. There are so many wonderful parts of Italy, and they will give you an entirely different perspective and greatly enhance your total experience. Many people find that the very best part of their whole trip was when they got off the beaten track to visit local towns, wineries, local festivals, or farms. So how do we reconcile our advice not to overload your itinerary with too many places, but also get beyond the big 3 to see some of the smaller towns and villages? We found that the best way to do this is by limiting your visit to 1 or max 2 regions, where you can visit a big city and then you can travel outside of the city to the smaller towns in the nearby area. And that way you minimize the time you spend traveling from one place to another. For example, if you plan to visit Florence, then you can also add visits to nearby Tuscan towns like Arezzo, San Gimignano, or Siena. And if you're going to go to Venice, well, then you could also go see Padua or Verona or Vicenza, which are very close. They all have a lot to offer, and you'll get a much better feel for the real Italy. The third mistake that we find people make is not planning their transportation from the airport to the city center before they come to Italy. This may sound a little odd since we're used to just hopping in a cab or an Uber when we're at the airport back home. But when you land in Italy after an overnight flight, you're really tired, you're a little bit disoriented, especially if this is your first trip to Italy. You don't know where to go or what to do or how to find the best way into the city from the airport. And this can be really stressful if you haven't planned it in advance. There are actually a few ways to get from the airport to town. For example, in Rome, you can take the train. It's called the Leonardo Express. It goes right from the airport to the Rome Termini, or the main station. Similarly, in Milan, you can take the Malpensa Express from the airport to the central station. You can also take a cab by exiting the terminal and looking for the official taxi stand. There's a flat fee in Rome to go from the airport. It's €50, takes you from the airport anywhere in the main city of Rome. Similarly, in Milan, it costs about €110 to get from the airport to the city center. Just make sure that you go to an official taxi stand. Do not accept a ride from anyone who offers you a ride inside the terminal. They're going to scam you and you will pay more. You can also pre-arrange a ride with a limo company or a private transfer, and they will actually wait for you with a sign as you exit the arrivals hall. And finally, you can take a bus. This is the cheapest way to get into town, but it also takes the longest. As for Uber, it does exist in Rome and Milan, but only Uber Black is available. That's the more premium version. So it will likely cost you more than a normal taxi. We've made a whole video about how to get from the Rome airport into the city center, and we will include a link to it in the description box below. Another mistake people make is expecting that things in Italy will be like they are back home. If you haven't traveled abroad very much, you may find a few culture shocks when you visit Italy. A lot of things will be a little bit different, so you just want to be aware of that and adjust your expectations so that you're not annoyed or upset by things that aren't what you're used to. For example, Italians don't eat dinner until 8 o'clock or later, and actually usually later, 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock. So if you're used to eating at 6 p.m., you're just going to have to adapt because it's going to be difficult, unless you're in a real touristy area, to find a place that opens before 7:30 in the evening. Or take air conditioning. Energy is extremely expensive throughout Europe, and Italians, for the most part, aren't that big on air conditioning anyway, because they think that cold air is unhealthy. So in many places, even if there is air conditioning, it won't be full blast like we're used to back in the States. It'll be on just enough to sort of cut the heat and humidity a little bit. Another thing we're not used to is having to pay for public toilets. Usually it's about €1, and so that means you should carry a little bit of change in your pocket in case you feel the need to go. And the good news is, with paying for the public toilets, is they're almost always really clean and well stocked with toilet paper. There are tons of other little things that are different than what you may be used to. And the key is to just go with the flow and embrace those cultural differences. That leads me to the next mistake that people make, which is cramming their days full of tours and activities in an effort to fit in as much as possible. You'll be exhausted and you won't enjoy your trip nearly as much as if you did fewer things and took the time to really appreciate each activity. And to that point, don't fall into the trap of feeling obligated to go visit certain attractions just because somebody said that you should. If you've had enough of churches, don't go see any more churches. If you're not an art lover, skip the art museums. This is your vacation. Do what you want to do. If you'd rather wander the local markets or take a cooking class than stand in line for an hour to climb up the bell tower of the cathedral, then do that. These are the memories you're going to savor forever. A mistake a lot of people make is not being prepared for the amount of walking they're going to be doing when they get to Italy. First of all, they don't build up walking stamina before they come. You will find that you do a lot more walking in Italy than most people do in their normal everyday life, anywhere from 12,000 to 20,000 steps a day. Even if you work out regularly or you play pickleball or tennis, walking actually uses different muscles. So if at all possible, try to get some walking in every day in the weeks before you come to Italy. You won't be as exhausted and you will enjoy your trip a lot more. And of course, make sure that you bring the right shoes. And by that I mean sneakers or other walking shoes that are worn in, have plenty of cushioning and plenty of support. Because in addition to walking a lot, you're going to be walking over cobblestones, which is hard on the feet and the knees. I'd even recommend bringing 2 pairs of sneakers and leaving those flimsy sandals and those heels at home. Oh, and if you're worried about not looking fashionable in sneakers, don't be worried. Everyone in Italy wears sneakers everywhere with everything. When it comes to eating out in Italy, there are a couple of mistakes to avoid. The first is eating in tourist trap restaurants. One of the best things about Italy is the food. But if you eat in a tourist trap restaurant, you'll end up paying inflated prices for mediocre food, and that would be such a shame. How to tell if it's a tourist trap restaurant? Well, there are a couple of dead giveaways. First, they're usually right around major tourist attractions and tourist sites like the Leaning Tower of Pisa or the Colosseum in Rome or the Duomo in Florence. They will have a large menu posted out front in multiple different languages and often with pictures of the food. And sometimes there will even be a waiter standing outside trying to lure you into the restaurant. And believe me, if a waiter has to try to beckon you into the restaurant, the food is not going to be good. So stay away from those places and instead walk a few blocks away from that major tourist attraction. Go down the narrow little streets and find a family-run trattoria where the locals eat. You'll get a tastier and more authentic meal, and you'll pay less for it. And when it comes to eating out in Italy, many people are afraid to try new dishes because they don't know what they are or they don't know what's in them. But that would be a mistake because every part of Italy has delicious dishes that are specialties of that region. And you really should definitely try them. It will enhance your whole experience. And if you don't know what to order, ask your server. They will be proud to advise you. A mistake travelers make that can end up being really costly is not buying trip insurance to cover unexpected problems with flight cancellations or delays, lost luggage, or heaven forbid, a medical emergency. When we were younger, we never even thought about trip insurance, and luckily, we never had a problem where we needed it. But today, we don't travel without it. Mainly, we get it for those unlikely but catastrophic situations where we have a medical emergency that requires us to be airlifted back to the United States. That can cost as much as $175,000. You heard me right, $175,000. Because we travel a lot, we have an annual subscription to MedJet Assist for these situations. It's not cheap, but it gives us great peace of mind. A few things to know about trip insurance. You can get trip insurance to cover all sorts of things. Cancellation of flights or delay of flights, cancellation of your trip due to illness, lost luggage, or medical emergencies while you're traveling. Some of these things may be covered by your credit card, but read the fine print carefully because often it provides basic coverage and may not reimburse you for the full out-of-pocket cost that you incur. It often makes sense to purchase separate trip insurance. You can go to a site like insuremytrip.com and compare the costs and coverage of many different trip insurance policies. And then you kind of have to do a cost-benefit analysis to see which one is right for you. But always read the fine print carefully to see what is covered and what is not covered. I know of people who were denied coverage for a COVID-related expense. Also, if you have a pre-existing condition, it may not cover the costs that are related to that while you're on your trip. A couple of other things that you should know. First of all, Medicare does not cover you when you are outside of the United States. If you have other health insurance, it may cover it, but it will be as an out-of-network provider, which means that you need to pay in advance, keep all your receipts, and then submit them after you get home from your trip. And it may cover, probably won't cover all of it, but may cover some of it. On the other hand, in Italy, if you have a medical emergency and need to go to the hospital because of it, you will not be charged. But if you have to be airlifted home, you're on your own, and the cost can be financially disastrous if you don't have trip insurance to cover that. Another mistake tourists often make, particularly in the summer, is wearing inappropriate clothing in churches and other religious sites. In many churches in Italy, it's required to cover both your shoulders and your knees. So if you're tempted to wear a sleeveless or tank top and shorts, you might want to rethink that if you're planning to visit a church. Alternatively, just bring a light sweater, shawl, or scarf that you can cover up with. And if you forget to pack one, often there are kiosks in very touristy areas outside of the church where you can buy a scarf or a shawl. Another mistake people make is coming to Italy without a plan for how they're going to use their phone for calls and internet access, and this can be a really expensive mistake. Let me give you an idea of what I mean. If you're not set up right, Just watching a 5-minute YouTube video on cellular data can cost you up to $100. That's right, $100 for a 5-minute video. There are two solutions for this, an easy one and a less expensive one. The easy one is to add an international plan to your existing plan for the time that you're traveling. If you use T-Mobile as your normal provider, it may already be included. But AT&T and Verizon both have international plans that cost $10 a day for the days that you use it. So if you use your phone at all on a given day, you'll get a $10 charge. And that covers the whole day. If you don't use it at all, then they don't charge you for that day. But it's important to set it up before you come. The less expensive option, which may make sense for you if you're going to stay for longer than a couple of weeks, is to get an Italian SIM for your phone. This usually costs, anywhere around €35 for a whole month of usage on a tourist plan. We have a whole video about the phone topic, and we will link it in the description below.